Captain Sarah adjusted her rifle scope one final time as the transport ship descended toward the purple-tinged atmosphere of 442b. Through the viewport, she could see the massive alien structures sprawling across the planet's surface like metallic growths. The Empire had been expanding aggressively for the past 50 years, and now they had made the mistake of targeting human colonies. "First time seeing a world?" asked Sergeant, checking his ammunition count for the third time since they left Earth's orbit. Sarah nodded, though she kept her expression neutral. As one of only 12 human marksmen selected for this mission, she couldn't afford to show any weakness. The other species in the Galactic Council had made their opinions clear during the briefings. Humans were too new, too primitive, too emotional for precision warfare. The representatives had actually laughed when Admiral suggested sending human snipers to deal with the problem. "Let the humans try," General had said, his reptilian features twisted in amusement. "When they fail, the military academy will handle this properly." Now, as Sarah watched the alien city grow larger below them, she felt the familiar calm settling over her mind. It was the same feeling she'd had during her first competition shoot at age 14, the same sensation that had carried her through 3 tours in Earth's final territorial conflicts, and the same peace that had made her the youngest person ever to achieve perfect scores in the Terran Defense Force's Advanced Marksmanship program. The transport shuddered as they hit the upper atmosphere. Around her, the other 11 marksmen made their final preparations. Each had been chosen not just for their shooting ability, but for their psychological profiles. The mission planners had needed soldiers who could function independently, make split-second decisions under pressure, and maintain accuracy while operating behind enemy lines for extended periods. 30 minutes to drop zone," announced Lieutenant from the pilot's compartment. "Weather conditions are optimal. Gravity is 0.87 Earth standard, atmosphere is breathable but thin, temperature is -15 Celsius. Sarah mentally adjusted her calculations. Lower gravity would affect bullet drop, and the thin atmosphere would reduce air resistance. She'd trained for these variables, but actual combat conditions were always different from simulations. The briefing materials scrolled through her memory. 442b was a fortress world, home to 3 billion, and the sector's primary military manufacturing complex. The planet's cities were built in concentric circles around massive shield generators that made orbital bombardment impossible. Previous attempts by forces had failed catastrophically, with hundreds of thousands of casualties. But the shield generators had a weakness. They required precise calibration to maintain their energy matrix, and that calibration depended on a network of control nodes scattered throughout each city. The nodes were heavily defended, surrounded by automated defenses and elite guards. Conventional assault teams had never gotten close enough to destroy them. That's where the human marksmen came in. Their mission was simple in concept, nearly impossible in execution. Infiltrate 12 different cities across the planet's primary continent. Locate and destroy the shield control nodes with precision shots from extreme range. Survive long enough for the main fleet to begin bombardment. 5 minutes to first drop, Lieutenant called out. Sarah stood and moved toward the drop pod assigned to her. Each marksman would be deployed separately, responsible for their own infiltration and target acquisition. They would have no backup, no support teams, and no extraction plan until the mission was complete. Sergeant caught her arm as she passed. "Remember what they taught us about thermal vision. They see heat patterns differently than we do. Use that." She nodded. The intelligence briefings had been thorough. Evolved on a world with limited sunlight, developing the ability to see detailed heat signatures instead of relying primarily on visible light. But their thermal vision had blind spots that human marksmen could exploit. 60 seconds to drop, announced. Sarah sealed her helmet and ran through her equipment checklist one final time. Her rifle was a custom-built precision instrument, designed specifically for this mission. The scope could switch between multiple vision modes and contained a microcomputer that calculated environmental factors automatically. Her ammunition consisted of specially designed rounds that could penetrate energy shields at the molecular level. The drop pod hissed as it sealed around her. Through the small viewport, she could see the alien landscape rushing up to meet her. Purple vegetation covered rolling hills, and in the distance, the spires of Ayler City rose like crystalline needles against the sky. Drop commencing, good hunting marksmen. The pod ejected from the transport with a violent lurch. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of, followed by the gradual deceleration as the pod's stealth systems engaged. She was now invisible to most detection systems, just another piece of space debris burning through the atmosphere. 10 minutes later, her pod touched down in a forest of what looked like purple bamboo. Sarah emerged carefully, weapon ready, scanning the area for threats. The air was thin but breathable, and she could hear unfamiliar sounds from the alien wildlife around her. According to her navigation system, Ayler City was 37 kilometers to the northeast. The shield control node was located in the city's central tower, approximately 2 kilometers from the nearest suitable shooting position. She would need to cover the distance unseen, establish a hide, and wait for the coordinated strike time in 72 hours. Sarah began moving through the forest, her training taking over. She had studied the terrain maps extensively, identifying the best approach routes and potential hiding spots. They had sensors throughout their territory, but they were designed to detect large groups of enemies, not individual infiltrators. After 6 hours of careful movement, she reached her first checkpoint, a ridge overlooking the river valley that led to Ayler. The city was even more impressive up close, its towers reaching nearly 2 kilometers into the sky. The shield generators created a faint shimmer in the air above the urban area, like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Sarah established a temporary hide and used her scope to study the city's defenses. Patrols moved in predictable patterns along the perimeter. Anti-aircraft positions were marked by the characteristic blue glow of their energy weapons. But most importantly, she could see her target, a crystalline structure at the top of the central tower, pulsing with the same energy signature as the shield generators. The next 70 hours would be the most challenging of her career. She needed to get within effective range, establish a concealed position, and wait for the moment when all 12 marksmen would fire simultaneously. The timing had to be perfect. If even one node remained active, the shields would hold, and the mission would fail. As night fell on the alien world, Sarah began her approach to the city. She moved like a ghost through the landscape, using every piece of cover, every shadow, every technique she had learned during years of training. They might have superior technology and numbers, but they had never faced human marksmen. By dawn, she was in position on a hillside overlooking the city, less than 1,500 meters from her target. Her hide was perfectly concealed, dug into the rocky soil and covered with local vegetation. From here, she could see the shield control node clearly through her scope, a crystal formation that pulsed with energy every 12 seconds. Sarah settled in to wait. Around the galaxy, 11 other human marksmen were doing the same thing, each preparing for a shot that would determine the fate of the war. They had said humans were too primitive for precision warfare. They had claimed human emotions made them unreliable in combat. Even some humans had doubted whether 12 individuals could accomplish what entire fleets had failed to achieve. But as Sarah watched her target and felt the familiar calm of a trained marksman settling over her mind, she knew something the aliens didn't understand. Humans had been hunters long before they reached the stars. They had learned patience, precision, and determination in the forests and plains of Earth, skills that no amount of advanced technology could replace. The countdown in her helmet display showed 66 hours and 37 minutes until the coordinated strike. Sarah, expert marksman of the Terran Defense Force, began her vigil. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived and thrived on one of the most dangerous planets in known space. In the distance, patrols continued their rounds, unaware that death waited in the hills with inhuman patience. The siege of 442B had begun, and for the first time in this war, the advantage belonged to humanity. The morning sun cast long shadows across the city as Sarah remained motionless in her hide. 28 hours had passed since she established her position, and she had not moved more than a few centimeters. Her body had adapted to the uncomfortable angle required to maintain sight on her target, while staying concealed from enemy sensors. Through her scope, she watched the daily patterns of the alien city unfold. Workers moved through the streets in organized groups, their heat signatures creating flowing patterns that her enhanced vision translated into movement maps. The aliens were efficient, she had to admit. Their society functioned with clockwork precision, every individual serving their assigned role without question. But precision could be a weakness. Patterns could be predicted, and predictions could be exploited. Sarah's communication implant received a brief status update from the mission coordinator. All 12 marksmen had reached their positions successfully, had reported some difficulty with patrols near his target city, but had managed to establish his hide without detection, had actually gotten closer than planned to her target, reducing her effective range to just 800 meters. The mission parameters were holding. In 38 hours and 17 minutes, they would fire simultaneously at targets across the continent. The shield network would collapse, and the human fleet waiting in the outer system would have 12 minutes to begin bombardment before backup generators could restore the barriers. 12 minutes to break a siege that had lasted 2 years. 12 shots to prove that humanity deserved its place among the galactic powers. Sarah's attention was drawn to movement near the base of the central tower. A convoy of heavily armed vehicles was approaching the shield control facility. Through her scope's enhanced optics, she could see military insignia and what appeared to be scientific equipment. They were conducting some kind of maintenance or upgrade to the shield generators. This was both an opportunity and a threat. If they were modifying their shield systems, they might change the energy signatures that the human weapons were designed to exploit. But the increased activity also meant more personnel near the target area, which could provide cover for any anomalous readings her own equipment might generate. Sarah activated her scope's recording function and began documenting the activities. Intelligence would want to analyze every detail of their shield technology. As she watched, technicians in environmental suits began working on crystalline structures surrounding her target node. Sparks of alien energy danced between their tools and the crystal formations. A movement to her left caught her attention. A patrol was approaching her hide from an unexpected direction. Sarah froze completely, controlling even her breathing to minimize any thermal signature. The patrol consisted of 4 soldiers in powered armor, each carrying weapons that could vaporize a human in seconds. The aliens moved past her position, their heat-sensitive vision scanning the hillside methodically. Sarah's camouflage held. The specially designed materials of her suit reflected and dispersed her body heat in patterns that mimicked the natural environment. To sensors, she appeared to be nothing more than an oddly shaped rock. But the patrol wasn't moving randomly. They were conducting a systematic search of the area, checking every possible hiding spot with military precision. Someone had detected something unusual, even if they couldn't identify exactly what. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. Her equipment was designed to be undetectable by standard sensors, but these soldiers might have upgraded detection gear. Or perhaps one of the other marksmen had been discovered, prompting increased security across all target cities. The lead soldier stopped less than 3 meters from Sarah's position. His helmet turned in her direction, and she could see the faint glow of enhanced optics scanning the area where she lay. For 30 seconds that felt like hours, the alien soldier studied the ground where Sarah had concealed herself. Then he raised his weapon. Sarah had milliseconds to make a decision. Moving would definitely reveal her position, but if the soldier fired, she would be dead regardless. She shifted slightly, bringing her sidearm into position while staying as low as possible. The movement was minimal, but it changed her heat signature enough to be detected. The soldier's helmet swiveled directly toward her. "Thermal anomaly confirmed," he announced in his species' clicking language, which Sarah's translator converted to her native tongue. "Possible infiltrator at grid reference 77 Alpha." Sarah fired 3 precise shots before the alien could activate his communications array. Her pistol was equipped with a suppressor designed specifically for this mission, reducing both sound and muzzle flash to nearly undetectable levels. All 3 rounds struck the soldier in the weak points of his armor, and he collapsed without alerting his squad mates. But now she had 30 seconds at most before the other soldiers noticed their leader was missing. Sarah moved with the fluid efficiency of years of combat experience. She dragged the soldier's body into her hide, positioning it to look like he had taken cover behind the same rocks. Then she activated the soldier's communicator and spoke in carefully practiced. "False alarm. Thermal signature was equipment malfunction. Continuing sweep pattern 7. The response came immediately. "Acknowledged. Maintain radio contact every 10 minutes. Sarah now had approximately 10 minutes to relocate before the deception was discovered. But moving meant abandoning her carefully prepared position and potentially compromising the entire mission. She could try to find another shooting position, but it might not have the same clear sight line to the target. Through her scope, she could see that the maintenance activity around the shield node was intensifying. More technicians had arrived, and they appeared to be installing additional protective equipment around the crystal formations. If the modifications continued, her ammunition might not be able to penetrate the upgraded defenses. The decision made itself. Sarah activated her emergency communicator and sent a brief coded message to Mission Control. Red 7, situation compromised but stable, maintaining position, possible target modifications in progress. She settled back into her hide and began the process of completely concealing the soldier's body. If the other patrol members found him, they would assume he had been killed by indigenous predators. The local wildlife included several species capable of penetrating armor. 9 minutes later, Sarah responded to the routine radio check using the dead soldier's communicator. Patrol Leader 7 reporting, all clear in Sector 7 Alpha, no anomalies detected. The response indicated that her deception was holding, but she knew it wouldn't last indefinitely. Eventually, the patrol would return to base or encounter other units, and her subterfuge would be discovered. She had bought herself time, but at the cost of increased risk. As the day progressed, Sarah continued monitoring the shield node modifications. The technicians were installing what appeared to be additional energy distributors around the main crystal. Her analysis software suggested that these modifications would increase the shield's resistance to energy weapons by approximately 30%. But Sarah's ammunition wasn't standard energy weapons. The rounds she carried were designed to disrupt energy fields at the quantum level, essentially convincing the shield generators that they were receiving shutdown commands from their own control systems. The additional distributors might actually make the weapons more effective by providing additional pathways for the disruption signal. 26 hours remained until the coordinated strike. Sarah began making final adjustments to her rifle, calibrating the scope for the exact range and environmental conditions she would face at the moment of firing. The modifications to the shield generator had actually improved her shooting angle, as the additional equipment provided better reference points for range estimation. A new patrol approached her position in the late afternoon. This time, Sarah was ready. She had repositioned the dead soldier's body to appear more naturally concealed, and had scattered some of his equipment to suggest he had taken defensive positions against local predators. The new patrol found the body exactly as Sarah had arranged it. After a brief investigation, they concluded that their comrade had been killed by a pack of native carnivores. The body was removed, and new patrol patterns were established that actually took the soldiers farther from Sarah's hide. As night fell again, Sarah allowed herself a small meal and carefully regulated water intake. The longest she had ever maintained a sniper position was 47 hours during a territorial conflict on Mars. This mission would push that record significantly, but she had trained for extended operations in hostile environments. The city below came alive with different patterns of activity as the nocturnal shift began. Society operated continuously, with different populations working around the clock to maintain their technological infrastructure. Sarah memorized these new patterns, noting potential cover and concealment opportunities if she needed to relocate. Her communication implant received another status update. All marksmen remained in position. 2 had encountered enemy patrols but had avoided detection. Had reported that her target modifications were similar to what Sarah was observing, suggesting a coordinated upgrade across all shield installations. Mission parameters remained unchanged. In 24 hours and 43 minutes, 12 human marksmen would fire simultaneously at targets they had never seen before arriving on this world. They would each have one shot to pierce defenses that had stopped entire fleets. If even one of them missed, or if their weapons failed to penetrate the upgraded shields, the mission would fail and the war would continue. Sarah had never missed a shot when it mattered, but she had also never faced stakes quite this high. The fate of human expansion into this sector of the galaxy depended on her ability to place one round precisely where it needed to go from a distance of nearly 1,500 meters, using a weapon she had only test-fired in simulated conditions. But as she settled back into her hide and continued her vigil over the alien city, Sarah felt the same calm confidence that had carried her through every challenge of her career. She was exactly where she needed to be, with exactly the skills required for this moment. The third day brought unexpected complications. Sarah woke from her brief rest period to find that they had deployed additional scanning equipment throughout the city. New sensor arrays appeared on rooftops and strategic positions, their energy signatures unlike anything in her mission briefings. The aliens were actively searching for something, and she suspected they had detected signs of the human infiltration. Through her scope, she observed increased military activity around all critical infrastructure. Guard rotations had doubled, and patrol patterns now included random variations that made prediction difficult. Most concerning was the arrival of what appeared to be elite counterintelligence teams near each shield generator facility. Sarah's communication implant buzzed with an emergency transmission from Mission Control. All red units be advised, enemy has implemented enhanced security protocols. Maintain current positions. Mission timeline unchanged. The message was brief, but Sarah could read between the lines. Other marksmen had been detected or were under pressure. The mission coordinators were gambling that the remaining time would be sufficient to complete their objectives before the enemy located all 12 positions. Sarah began a systematic review of her hide and equipment. Every piece of gear was examined for potential detection signatures. Her rifle's scope was recalibrated to account for the new sensor arrays that might interfere with its targeting systems. Most importantly, she studied the modified patrol patterns to identify windows of opportunity for her shot. The shield control node continued to pulse with energy every 12 seconds, but the installation of additional protective equipment had changed its heat signature slightly. Sarah's targeting computer recalculated constantly, updating firing solutions based on environmental factors and target modifications. A new sound drew her attention. High above the city, atmospheric craft were conducting search patterns with equipment she didn't recognize. The craft moved in precise grids, their sensors sweeping the terrain outside the city limits. Sarah estimated that at their current search rate, they would reach her sector within 6 hours. She had two choices: relocate to a position that might not offer as clear a shot, or maintain her current hide and risk detection. Moving would require several hours and might put her in position just as the atmospheric search reached the new area. Staying meant betting her concealment against increasingly sophisticated detection methods. Sarah chose a third option. Using techniques learned during survival training on Europa, she began modifying her hide to create multiple layers of thermal and electromagnetic concealment. She buried her backup equipment at specific intervals to create false signatures that might confuse enemy sensors. If the search craft detected anything, they would find empty holes and abandoned gear instead of an active sniper. The work took 4 hours and left her exhausted, but the results were worth the effort. Her modified hide now appeared to be nothing more than natural rock formation to both thermal and electromagnetic scanning. The buried equipment created a pattern of false contacts that would take enemy teams hours to investigate fully. As the search craft approached her sector, Sarah activated the final component of her deception plan. She triggered a small thermal device hidden 2 kilometers from her position, creating a heat signature that would appear to be a human trying to conceal their presence. The device would operate for 30 minutes before burning out, hopefully drawing the search teams away from her actual location. The atmospheric craft immediately altered course toward the false contact. Sarah watched through her scope as ground teams rushed to investigate the thermal signature. For the next several hours, enemy forces would be focused on the wrong hillside while she remained undetected in her original position. But the successful deception came with a cost. Sarah now knew that they were aware of human infiltrators and were actively hunting them. The enemy's response suggested they understood the threat that precision marksmen posed to their shield network. This was no longer a covert operation. It was a race against time before the aliens located and neutralized the human positions. Sarah's scope picked up movement around her target. Technicians were installing what appeared to be emergency backup systems for the shield control node. If completed, these modifications would ensure that the shield network could continue operating even if several nodes were destroyed simultaneously. She activated her emergency communicator and transmitted a detailed report of the backup installations to Mission Control. The intelligence would be crucial for adjusting the mission parameters, but it also increased her risk of detection. Every transmission, no matter how brief, created a signature that enemy sensors might identify. The response came within minutes. Red 7 intelligence received, Backup systems confirmed at multiple targets. Mission timeline advanced. Coordinate strike in 8 hours, 43 minutes. Acknowledge. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The mission had been moved up by nearly 16 hours. Instead of the carefully planned dawn assault, they would now fire during the late afternoon when activity was at its peak. The timing change would affect wind patterns, light conditions, and enemy patrol schedules. She began immediate of her equipment. Afternoon conditions would create thermal updrafts that could affect bullet trajectory. The increased enemy activity meant more potential witnesses to her shot, but it also provided more background noise to mask her muzzle's signature. Most critically, the advanced timeline meant she had less than 9 hours to make final preparations for what might be the most important shot in human history. Sarah spent the next 4 hours in intensive preparation. She memorized every detail of wind patterns, temperature variations, and atmospheric conditions that could affect her shot. Her rifle was cleaned and rechecked multiple times. The scope was calibrated to account for the exact angle and distance to her target at the new firing time. Through careful observation, she identified the optimal moment for her shot. Every 12 minutes, the shield control node entered a brief cycle that reduced its defensive barriers by approximately 15%. During this window, her ammunition would have the best chance of penetrating the protective systems and disrupting the energy matrix. But timing the shot to coincide with all 12 targets simultaneously entering their cycles would require precision measured in milliseconds. Sarah's targeting computer would need to coordinate with similar systems operated by 11 other marksmen across the continent, each dealing with their own unique environmental and tactical challenges. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah noticed increased communication traffic from the enemy positions. Commanders were clearly coordinating a systematic search of all areas surrounding critical infrastructure. Several times, she observed troops responding to what appeared to be suspected infiltrator locations. Her communication implant provided intermittent updates from other red units. Reported that enemy forces had discovered and destroyed his backup equipment cache, but had missed his actual position. Had been forced to eliminate a patrol that came too close to her hide, but had managed to conceal the bodies before other units arrived. The pressure was building across all 12 positions. The new humans were out there, and they were methodically eliminating possible hiding places. It was only a matter of time before one or more marksmen were discovered, potentially compromising the entire operation. Sarah checked her chronometer. 4 hours and 17 minutes remained until the coordinated strike. Around her, the alien world continued its daily cycles, unaware that its fate hung on the accuracy of 12 humans positioned in carefully concealed hides across the continent. The shield generators continued their steady pulse, creating the energy barriers that had protected this world for decades. Soon, that protection would be tested against human precision in a way that had never anticipated. Sarah settled into her final firing position and began the mental preparation techniques that had served her throughout her career. In a few hours, she would take a shot that would either prove humanity's worth among the galactic powers or confirm the aliens' assessment that humans were too primitive for precision warfare. The scope's crosshairs settled on her target with mechanical precision. The shield control node pulsed with energy, each flash marking another step closer to the moment when everything would change. Sarah's breathing slowed to the steady rhythm of a trained marksman preparing for the most important shot of her life. In positions across the continent, 11 other humans were making identical preparations. Soon, the galaxy would learn why Earth had produced some of the finest marksmen in known space, and why underestimating human capabilities had been a mistake that entire species would remember for generations. 2 hours before the coordinated strike, everything began falling apart. Sarah's communication implant crackled with an emergency transmission. Red 4 is compromised, under heavy fire. Red 9 reporting enemy forces closing on position. All units maintain firing positions. Mission continues as planned. Through her scope, Sarah could see increased military activity throughout the city below. Atmospheric craft were now conducting continuous sweeps, and ground forces were moving in coordinated search patterns that suggested they had narrowed down possible marksman locations. They had shifted from investigation to active engagement. Another transmission arrived, this one heavily distorted by interference. Red 11 down, eliminated multiple hostiles but position burned. Red 7, you are now priority alpha for Sector 7. Acknowledge. Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Had been one of their most experienced marksmen, with over 200 confirmed kills in 3 different conflicts. If she had been overwhelmed, the enemy's response was far more sophisticated than intelligence had suggested. Red 7 acknowledging priority alpha status. Position stable, target acquired, ready to execute on schedule. The response came immediately. Red 7, enemy is triangulating communication sources. This is final transmission until strike confirmation. Mission parameters unchanged. Fire on schedule. Good hunting. Silence settled over the communication channel, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts, and the weight of knowing that the success of the entire operation might now depend on fewer marksmen than originally planned. She couldn't know how many of her colleagues remained in position, but the emergency transmissions suggested that several had been discovered or eliminated. Sarah forced herself to focus on her immediate responsibilities. The mission would proceed with whoever remained operational. She began final preparation procedures, checking and rechecking every component of her rifle system. The scope was perfectly calibrated. The ammunition was specially designed for this exact scenario, and her position provided an ideal shooting angle to the target. Through her enhanced optics, she studied the shield control node one final time. The technicians had completed their modifications, adding multiple layers of protective equipment around the crystal formation. But Sarah's analysis software indicated that these additions might actually create vulnerabilities that her ammunition could exploit. The node continued its regular energy pulse every 12 seconds. During each pulse, the protective barriers fluctuated slightly, creating a brief window where her round might penetrate more easily. The timing would need to be perfect, but perfect timing was exactly what human marksmen had been trained to achieve. Movement around the base of the target tower caught her attention. Military units were deploying what appeared to be portable shield generators around critical infrastructure points. If those systems became operational, they would create additional barriers that could deflect or absorb her shot before it reached the primary target. Sarah activated her rifle's targeting computer and began calculating firing solutions for multiple scenarios. If the portable shields were active during the strike, she would need to adjust her aim to find gaps in their coverage. The computer identified 17 possible shooting angles that might avoid the mobile defenses, but most required her to relocate to different positions. Time had run out for major position changes. Sarah would need to work with her current location and adapt her shot based on conditions at the moment of firing. She began practicing the rapid scope adjustments that might be necessary to acquire alternative targeting solutions in the seconds before taking her shot. An hour before the strike, Sarah noticed something that made her reconsider her entire approach. The portable shield generators were being positioned in patterns that suggested they understood exactly how human marksmen would attempt to attack their control nodes. The defensive positions weren't random. They were specifically designed to counter precision shots from elevated positions around the city. Someone had provided them with detailed intelligence about human sniper tactics. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. If the enemy knew how human marksmen operated, they would have prepared countermeasures for every aspect of the mission. The shield modifications, the enhanced patrols, the atmospheric searches, everything suggested that they had been expecting this exact type of attack. But intelligence flowed both ways. If the enemy had studied human tactics, then humans had studied alien defenses. Sarah's training had included extensive analysis of military doctrine, and she knew that their rigid tactical thinking could be exploited by marksmen willing to operate outside conventional parameters. She began implementing modifications to her firing plan based on unconventional sniper techniques developed specifically for fighting non-human opponents. Instead of aiming for the center mass of the shield control node, she would target the junction points where energy flowed between the primary crystal and the newly installed protective equipment. The targeting computer initially rejected this approach, indicating that the junction points were too small and moved too rapidly for reliable targeting. But Sarah overrode the computer's recommendations and began manually calculating a firing solution that relied entirely on her own ability to track and engage a moving target at extreme range. 30 minutes before the strike, The city below erupted into activity that suggested the had detected the remaining human positions. Atmospheric craft began concentrating their searches on specific sectors, and ground forces moved with the urgency of troops responding to confirmed enemy contact. Sarah's position remained undetected, but she could see evidence of combat in several areas around the city perimeter. Smoke rose from at least 3 locations where explosions indicated that marksmen might be engaging enemy forces directly. The coordinated nature of the mission was breaking down into individual battles for survival. But the mission timeline held. Sarah checked her chronometer and saw 15 minutes remaining until the coordinated strike. Regardless of how many marksmen remained operational, she would fire at the designated time and attempt to destroy her assigned target. She settled into her final firing position and began the breathing exercises that would steady her aim for the critical shot. The rifle felt familiar and comfortable in her hands, its weight and balance exactly as she had trained with during hundreds of practice sessions. The scope's crosshairs aligned perfectly with her target, and the range calculations were locked into her targeting computer. 10 minutes before the strike, Sarah's enhanced hearing detected the sound of approaching aircraft. Through her scope, she could see 2 atmospheric craft moving directly toward her sector, their sensors sweeping the terrain in patterns that would eventually reveal her position. She had perhaps 5 minutes before the aircraft reached her hide. Not enough time to relocate, and moving would definitely reveal her position to the enemy sensors. Sarah would need to take her shot while under direct observation by enemy forces, then attempt to escape before they could bring weapons to bear on her location. The aircraft were 3 minutes away when Sarah made her final preparations. She activated her rifle's stealth systems, which would minimize muzzle flash and sound signature, but could only be used once before requiring recharge. Her escape plan involved a rapid movement down the hillside to a concealed ravine where she had positioned emergency supplies. 2 minutes before the coordinated strike, the aircraft were close enough that Sarah could see their crew members through her scope. They were using handheld sensors to examine suspicious terrain features, systematically eliminating possible hiding places with methodical precision. 1 minute remaining. Sarah's breathing slowed to the steady rhythm she had practiced thousands of times. Her heart rate dropped to the controlled pace that indicated perfect shooting conditions. The crosshairs settled on the junction point she had identified between the shield control node and its protective equipment. 30 seconds. The aircraft were close enough that their engine noise was clearly audible. Through her peripheral vision, Sarah could see crew members preparing to investigate the rock formation that concealed her hide. 15 seconds. Sarah's finger found the trigger and applied the precise pressure that would fire the weapon. The scope's targeting computer confirmed optimal conditions for the shot. Wind speed was minimal, temperature was stable, and the target junction was clearly visible. 5 seconds. The shield control node began its regular energy pulse, creating the brief window of vulnerability that would allow her ammunition to penetrate the protective systems. 3 seconds. The aircraft was directly overhead, its sensors beginning to detect thermal anomalies in the area of Sarah's hide. 1 second. Sarah's targeting computer synchronized with the mission network, confirming that other surviving marksmen were ready to fire simultaneously. 0. Sarah squeezed the trigger and sent a specially designed round screaming across 1,500 meters of alien landscape toward a target that represented the hopes and fears of human expansion into this sector of the galaxy. The shot that would prove whether humanity had earned its place among the stars, or confirm that they remained too primitive for the challenges of galactic warfare. The rifle's recoil absorbed into her shoulder with familiar force as the projectile began its journey toward the shield control node, carrying with it the culmination of years of training, planning, and determination that defined the human approach to seemingly impossible challenges. The round flew true. Sarah watched through her scope as the specially designed projectile covered the 1,500 meters to its target in less than 2 seconds. The ammunition struck the junction point between the shield control node and its protective equipment with surgical precision, just as the energy pulse cycle created its brief window of vulnerability. For a moment, nothing appeared to happen. The crystalline structure continued to pulse with energy, and the protective shields remained active around the city. Sarah began to wonder if her shot had failed to achieve its intended effect. Then the shield control node began to fluctuate. The steady 12-second pulse pattern became erratic, with energy surges appearing at random intervals. Through her scope, Sarah could see technicians frantically working at control panels around the base of the tower, their movements suggesting emergency protocols were being implemented. But it was too late. The quantum disruption effect of Sarah's ammunition had already begun cascading through the node's energy matrix. The junction point she had targeted was a critical connection that distributed power to backup systems throughout the network. By severing that connection, she had triggered a progressive failure that would spread to other components. Across the continent, similar disruptions were occurring at 10 other shield installations. Through her communication implant, Sarah could hear the sounds of success from her surviving colleagues. Red 2 confirming target destroyed, shield generator offline. Red 6 successful, massive secondary explosions observed. Red 8 target eliminated, enemy forces in full retreat. The coordinated strike had worked. Despite losing several marksmen to enemy action, enough humans had remained in position to deliver precision shots that disabled the planet's primary shield network. The barriers that had protected 442B for decades were collapsing in a cascade of failing energy systems. But Sarah's immediate concern was survival. The aircraft overhead had detected the thermal signature of her rifle firing, and enemy troops were already moving to investigate her position. She had perhaps 30 seconds before hostile forces would have her hide under direct fire. Sarah activated her emergency escape plan. She rolled away from her shooting position just as the first enemy weapon's fire struck the rocks where she had been concealed. Energy beams carved smoking channels through the stone, but Sarah was already moving down the hillside toward the concealed ravine where she had positioned backup equipment. Behind her, the city's shield generators were failing in spectacular fashion. Massive energy discharges lit up the sky as backup systems tried and failed to compensate for the damaged control nodes. The protective barriers that had made the planet invulnerable to orbital bombardment were dissolving like morning mist. Sarah reached her emergency cache and activated the long-range communicator hidden there. Red 7 to Fleet Command. Shields are down. Repeat, primary shield network has failed. Commence bombardment immediately. The response was immediate and overwhelming. High above the planet's atmosphere, the human fleet had been waiting for exactly this moment. Dozens of ships began moving into bombardment positions, their weapons systems targeting the military installations that had been protected by the failing shields. Sarah's communicator crackled with transmissions from other surviving marksmen, had escaped his compromised position and was moving toward the extraction point. Had been declared missing in action, but 3 other marksmen in her sector had successfully eliminated their targets. Of the original 12, 8 remained operational and were beginning extraction procedures. The first orbital strikes began reaching the planet's surface as Sarah moved through the ravine toward her designated extraction zone. Massive explosions lit up the horizon as human kinetic weapons struck military installations with devastating precision. The alien defenders were experiencing their first taste of human warfare conducted without restrictions. Through her scope, Sarah observed the city she had spent 4 days watching. The central tower was collapsing as its shield-powered structural supports failed. Military units were in full retreat, abandoning defensive positions that were no longer protected by energy barriers. The organized efficiency she had admired was breaking down into chaos as the aliens confronted a threat they had never prepared to face. But the mission wasn't complete. Sarah still needed to reach the extraction zone and provide detailed intelligence about the shield systems she had observed. The information would be crucial for planning similar operations against other fortress worlds. As she moved through the alien landscape, Sarah reflected on the significance of what had just occurred. 12 human marksmen had accomplished what entire fleets had failed to achieve. They had proven that precision and individual skill could overcome overwhelming technological superiority when applied with proper planning and determination. The extraction zone was located in a valley 15 kilometers from the city, where stealth transports would retrieve the surviving marksmen. Sarah's journey would take her through territory now occupied by retreating forces, but the orbital bombardment was keeping most enemy units focused on survival rather than hunting for human infiltrators. 3 hours later, Sarah reached the extraction coordinates. was already there, along with 4 other marksmen who had successfully completed their missions. They compared notes while waiting for the transport, sharing observations about defenses and tactical responses that would inform future operations. "Did you see how they positioned those portable shields?" asked. "It's like they knew exactly how we would approach the targets." Sarah nodded. Someone provided them with intelligence about human sniper tactics, but they didn't understand that we could adapt faster than they could counter. The stealth transport arrived under cover of the orbital bombardment, its pilot reporting that the orbital defenses had been completely neutralized. The surviving marksmen boarded quickly, each carrying intelligence that would prove invaluable for the ongoing war effort. As the transport lifted off from the alien world, Sarah looked back at the cities they had helped to conquer. Smoke rose from dozens of military installations, and the distinctive energy signatures of shield generators were nowhere to be seen. The planet that had been considered impregnable was now defenseless against human conventional forces. The journey back to the fleet took 6 hours, during which Sarah compiled her detailed report on the mission. She documented every aspect of the defenses, the effectiveness of human equipment against alien technology, and recommendations for improving future precision operations. When the transport docked with the command ship, Admiral was waiting personally to debrief the returning marksmen. Sarah had never met the Admiral before, but his reputation as a strategic innovator was well known throughout the human military. "Captain," the Admiral said as she disembarked, "your shot initiated the cascade failure that brought down the entire northern sector's shield network. Without that success, we might have lost the entire operation." Sarah maintained military bearing despite her exhaustion. "Thank you, sir. The mission succeeded because every marksman performed their role perfectly. We proved that human precision can overcome alien technology." Admiral smiled. "You proved more than that, Captain. Word of this operation is already spreading through the galactic community. The High Command has requested detailed briefings on human sniper capabilities. The military academy wants to exchange training programs with our marksman schools." Sarah felt a surge of pride at the implications. The mission had accomplished far more than destroying a single shield network. It had established humanity's reputation as a military force that could compete with species that had been conducting interstellar warfare for. "The Empire has already requested peace negotiations," the Admiral continued. "They're offering significant territorial concessions in exchange for guarantees that human marksmen won't be used against their core worlds." Sarah understood the strategic significance. The aliens had learned to fear human precision in a way they had never feared human numbers or technology. 12 individuals with rifles had achieved what entire fleets couldn't accomplish, and every species in the galaxy would remember that lesson. Over the following weeks, reports reached the fleet about the broader impact of the 442B operation. Other alien military commands were restructuring their defensive doctrines specifically to counter human sniper tactics. New technologies were being developed to detect and neutralize individual marksmen operating at extreme ranges. But the humans were adapting as well. Training programs for marksmen were being expanded, and new equipment was being developed to maintain the advantages that had made the mission successful. The galaxy had learned to fear human marksmen, but humanity was working to ensure that fear remained justified. Sarah returned to Earth with a promotion to Major and assignment to the newly formed Precision Warfare Division. Her mission reports became required reading at military academies throughout human space, and her techniques were studied by marksmen preparing for similar operations against other alien strongholds. The galaxy had indeed learned to fear one thing above all others: a human marksman with a clear shot and unlimited patience. The lesson of 442B would be remembered whenever alien powers considered challenging humanity's expansion among the stars. In the end, it hadn't been human technology or numbers that proved decisive. It had been the same qualities that had made humans successful hunters on Earth millions of years ago: patience, precision, and the determination to take one perfect shot when everything depended on accuracy. The age of human expansion had begun not with the roar of massive fleets, but with the whisper of perfectly aimed projectiles finding their targets across impossible distances. And throughout the galaxy, military planners were learning to account for the possibility that somewhere in the darkness, a human marksman might be watching, waiting and preparing to take the shot that would change everything. The galaxy would soon learn what humans could accomplish when precision mattered more than overwhelming force.